Well, good morning. I'm using my new camera. This is going to be interesting to see how this turns out. Anyway, I just wanted to film this morning because of the sounds of the birds. I've just been walking around the garden with Jack and my morning coffee and just listening. And in listening to the birds, I've come to the conclusion that what Bealtaine Cottage represents on this landscape here in North County Roscommon is an actual oasis. Because as I've walked around the land, well, just this, the top part of the land this morning, listening to the birds and watching them, listening to the bees. In fact, you can probably hear one now. It has occurred to me that all around the edges of this land, there are virtually no sounds. All the sounds of life are happening here, inside the boundaries of what is Bealtaine. It's quite a shock to realise this, because there are lots of other people living here, all around me. But most of what those houses and gardens and agricultural land represents is actually not sustainable. First of all, Bealtaine Cottage is no longer sustainable. It is regenerative. Because sustainable means just to keep life going. But what's happening here at Bealtaine Cottage is completely regenerative. Life is regenerating itself and multiplying and becoming not just abundant, but extremely abundant. I spent quite a large part of the autumn and winter cutting back, pruning, opening up areas where there was perhaps, too much growing, things were growing in on themselves. And you can see some of the cutting back that's gone on here. And yet, in spite of this, maybe even because of this, life has resurged with such vigour that it's sort of overwhelming. You can see here the wood that I've cut and stacked. And of course I leave it out for about a year. And during that time it creates, again, essential habitat. Not that I need to be even doing this now, because the habitat is recreating itself and regenerating itself and multiplying itself. Jack? Even stuff like rhubarb here, which I thought I'd actually dug a lot of this out last year. well, it just seems to have multiplied and come back up with even more vigour. Young trees like this, little cherry tree, is flowering this year, so we're looking for fruit. There should be lots of fruit on that. The pear tree. This is my compost toilet area. All those bins hold the contents of the compost toilet is emptied into those bins. Something else actually I wanted to mention. You cannot have a permaculture small holding without having a compost toilet system, because that represents what is in essence, I suppose, zone zero. And if you haven't got everything right in zone zero, you know, it's going to just be a drain on the resources of the general system. And good permaculture is about taking the pressure off the system and putting in place a system which is very local and does not rely on outside resources, and is regenerative, not just sustainable but regenerative. So as you can see, this is poor land. This was described as poor agricultural land, and yet there is abundance here. And there are no animals on site, only human animals and human waste. So it's really important to have that compost toilet system in place if you want to have true permaculture. In fact, as you may already know if you've watched previous videos and visited the website, this is no longer just permaculture, it is goddess permaculture, because it is connecting everything back to the divine feminine. That is, of course, Mother Earth. Just take a look at this red currant bush. This is one red currant bush, okay? One. There must be 50 stems on this bush, and every single stem is laden with red currant flowers, which will become red currants. I mean, that is unfathomable, you know, how something like that has happened on poor land, but there you go. I've often said that I'm quite sure it would be of great interest for, the Botanical Society in Dublin to come and visit this place and see the measure of what is growing here, because it just defies all the rule books, completely defies all the rule books. You can see here where I've been cutting back the bamboo, and again, just this wonderful resurgence of new growth. Just go around the front briefly and then go around the back, and I'll show you what's happening in the new orchard. That's the one on the bank above the lodge. And in terms of this being a forest garden and a food forest garden, or I suppose more appropriate it would be called a woodland garden, the canopies existing in this woodland garden are very, very complex and yet seem to be entirely not just self-supporting but supporting each other in that complexity. Like here we have blackcurrant, okay, and spirea, and box and dogwood, and fuchsia and rowan and oak, and rosa canina, that's the wild rose, and hazel and beech, and a different kind of spirea there, and Senecio and pyracantha and ribes and weiglia, and field maple and birch and ash and cherry and carria and laurel and photinia and cotoneaster and euphorbia, and just the list goes on and on and on. Such a huge complexity of plants and shrubs, and one stacking up underneath the other. You know, it's kind of relentless. You know, there's not a bare patch of earth here on this laughingly called Poor Land. So we'll just go around the back, and even here on this little rustic bed, which has got about 1.5 inches of compost on it, that's all. There's no soil there. You have all these Japanese salads coming up. Look, and mustard. You see the mustard's flowering. I was pulling mustard out of this bed yesterday because it just seems to have taken over. Look at this. Leaving that there, of course, for the bees because they love to pollinate those flowers and pick the nectar. And just called Jack because he's inclined to go down. Oh, there he is. Come on, Jack. Let me just go up here now. Double and triple planting into what was the old hedgerow, creating again lots of habitat. Just go up round the back of this little shed here, and you can see here just where I've stacked up cuttings, so lots and lots of chop and drop, and again masses of habitat in there. And of course, where you have habitat for wildlife, you also have food for wildlife. So you're able to build up that ecological step ladder, that ecological circle of life, you know. But in terms of the step ladder, you're firmly putting in new rungs all the time, and you can up and up and up and up, and then it starts to join on and kind of become circular, and it is just the most amazing project to be involved in. And yes, this is a project. In another 12 days' time, it will be the 13th anniversary of the beginning of the Bealtaine project. Bealtaine, of course, is named after the month of May. It's Irish for May, and this project was begun. Well, certainly in my in my head was begun on the 1st of May 2004. So this is the new orchard here. I planted this out, I think it's 2 years ago. Yeah, I think so. Anyway, so this is the little cherry tree here, and look at the amount of blossom on it. Isn't that amazing? Look at that. Going to have masses of fruit on that. So again, I underplanted it mainly just with little cuttings, you know. So let's just look at the underplanting here. So first of all, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 7 fruit trees. So there's pear, cherry, eating apple, cooking apple. Underplanted with London Pride, mint, geranium, euphorbia, Crocosmia rumbretia, red currant, black currant, 2 forms of mint, by the way. One's a spearmint, one's a chocolate mint. Let me just say now, there's this grass as well. Lots of rubus, of course, because that's the great pioneer plant. That goes in and kind of clears the ground and also provides really good ground cover. There's sedge, there's fuchsia, there's all different kinds of sort of hedging plant in there. The wild edge. The wild edge at the moment is where I'm putting a little bit of ash from the fire, because of course over in that wild edge there was a lot of asbestos tiles from what was the old roof of the cottage years ago, and I discovered those when I went digging. So I've decided just to kind of cover them up, leave them in situ. I haven't got the resources to deal with them, so leave them there and allow nature to, you know, take over them. And in fact, that process started some years ago with the build-up of mosses around them. So what I've done is I've gone in and I've put little cuttings of different hedgerow plants, and then there'll be some layers of ash from the fire. There'll be lots of chopping and dropping, and so that becomes a bank. It becomes a bank where a very complex hedgerow system grows. Jack, come here. So we'll just walk on down this way. We'll just take a look back then at the new orchard in situ, and you can see that slow build-up of a complex food forest. This is the old hen house, which I use now as a store for kindling, and sometimes then during the summer it becomes the home to other little insects and creatures. Now the battery's just about to go, so I'm going to keep going until the end. Beautiful cherry tree. And there's the bedrock. And listen to the life.